Order online at picassospizza.net.
Folks, welcome on in. There is a time to put in the work. There is a time to kick your feet up, and there is a time to pay the bills. And that's exactly what we're doing on tonight's podcast. We got wide receiver talk. We've got more, but Waddle has found his way to Denver. We've got the defense revamped, and we are grading Brandon Beane. It's time for a report card on pay the bills. Let's bring in the panel. You know him, you love him, Mike Bunt. We got AJ Cebulski, and we got the Take King, Carson Hayek. Boys, obviously, welcome in, and it's a pretty good night. Things are getting a little warmer in Western New York, but things have been heating up for the past couple weeks in free agency and some special action today. Mike, did you mute yourself?
I did right off the bat. Good stuff.
Listen, there's nothing better than a mute monster right out the bat. You didn't interrupt any flow. We had nothing going. It was an okay introduction by me. Hit it, Bunty.
But, yeah, absolutely excited to talk some Bills football. A lot to get to today regarding DJ Moore versus Jalen Waddle. What move made more sense? A lot of offseason moves in the last week by the Bills. You said it's warming up. Definitely doesn't feel that way outside today in Buffalo with the wind chill at 0 degrees, but we are getting warmer weather on the way. Excited to see what happens the rest of free agency. And then we got some draft talk coming up a month from now.
Yeah, it's been a fun offseason, an eventful offseason for the Buffalo Bills. And I think just the NFL in general, you look at the Max Crosby situation over there. There's been a lot of fun storylines, conversations to discuss. I know we'll get to a lot of that today, but happy St. Patrick's Day. It's I don't know if you're a corned beef and cabbage, if there's anyone that I don't like it, but I know there's a lot of people out there that enjoy it. So I hope you enjoy that today. But I'm looking forward to, seeing what Brandon Beane does leading into the draft and how he really attacks this draft here coming up in a month.
Yeah, good to be back. Definitely no doubt about it. Team makes some moves, especially on the defensive side of the ball. We'll get into all the specifics and stuff like that. But so far, you can definitely see there's been an emphasis on some needs that we've talked about specifically. At the wide receiver position, they go get DJ Moore, and defensively secondary, there's been some concerns about that. Just kind of collectively the aging out process of this past year's Bills defense. So still, I don't think they're done. And ultimately, I do think the draft is really going to be where this team either gets exponentially better or just a little bit better, and it's going to be really the big determinant whether or not our team takes the next step next year.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see with the losing of McDermott, and then obviously like a lot of new personnel on the defense, how that shapes up. But excited to see that unit put to work. But today's news dominating the headlines, obviously, is Jalen Waddle, quote unquote, the one that got away, some are saying, in Bills Mafia, but finds his way to Denver for Jalen and a 2026 fourth to Denver for Miami's Jalen Waddle and a fourth-round pick to Denver. I got completely scrambled there. Denver sent to Miami their first-round pick, third and fourth. So overall in this deal, Bunty, you were kind of translating it to the overall value and trying to make some sense of it.
Yeah, I think it's a good move for Denver, but really when you're a Bills fan, you're comparing it to what the DJ Moore trade was and what made more sense for the Bills. Now, I think after you see Waddle and all what it took for Denver to acquire him, it makes the DJ Moore move look a little bit more sensible from a Bills perspective, especially when you realize that Miami likely would have required the Bills to pay even more than what the Broncos gave to make a move like that happen within the division. That's if the Dolphins were even willing to trade him within the AFC East. At the end of the day, the Bills gave up a second-round pick, number 60, I believe, and they end up getting a DJ Moore who's had 4 1,000-yard seasons, and he's had a lot of good years. And, yes, he's coming off a down season. He's a year and a half older than Waddle. But production-wise, you're getting similar type production. Jalen Waddle is in the prime of his career right now. He's younger. He's probably a little bit more talented than DJ Moore. But giving up a first-round pick and then adding a third on top of it, I know they also swapped fourth-round picks. Bills fans were complaining about giving up a second-round pick. I don't know if Bills fans could have swallowed a first and a third, especially when we're talking about a guy that sometimes isn't always healthy. And we were complaining about there's a lot of holes on this defense. There's a lot of work that the Bills need to do this offseason to make sure that they're a more complete roster. At the end of the day, I think after seeing the trade compensation today, you should feel better about the Bills' move for DJ Moore versus what Broncos ended up doing for Jalen Waddle, even if it makes sense for Denver.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it from a production perspective, I think both players have fared similarly in their situations. Now, I think the argument for Jalen Waddle, and I mean, I think I would have done this move if I were the Bills. I think it is a little steep, but a second-round pick for DJ Moore also is a steep price, especially a year and a half older, and the money involved with DJ Moore, technically a 2-year commitment. There's an out after year 3, but you're essentially tied to him for 2 years. Not saying that a second-round pick would produce like a DJ Moore does over those 2 years, but I think if you look at the Jalen Waddle situation, I believe that he has higher upside. I think he's the better overall player, and I think he's a little bit younger, and the money's around the same. So I think Jalen Waddle brings something that he's not been able to really show to his full potential, maybe due to injury. Also a big reason having Tua as his quarterback. Also another big reason having Tyreek Hill as that kind of 1 for, that offense for the past few years. So Jalen Waddle hasn't even really been in that role where he's asked to be that top guy, where I think a DJ Moore he was in Carolina. So it makes me excited for the Broncos to see how they could utilize Jalen Waddle, how Sean Payton utilizes him in that offense. But I think both teams, the Bills and the Broncos, fared out, pretty well with these deals. They got their guys, their number ones in their late 20s. They got to pay a little money. They had to give, some draft capital away. But all in all, both GMs, I think, walk away happy. But I definitely think the Waddle deal for me, there's the higher upside move with more potential for that impact X factor for the Broncos compared to a DJ Moore move with the Bills.
Yeah, Waddle definitely has more potential, I think. But from a production standpoint, you mentioned they're kind of similar. And I think a lot of it has been their surrounding environment. I think the trade makes sense, at least from Miami's perspective. They got a new head coach. They now have a new GM as well. I think these next 1 year to 3 years, I think it's going to be really indicative on where they plan on going, whether that's going to be a full-scale rebuild, which is totally possible. They're going to have a new quarterback next year. They're just kind of looking to get the right guys on the bus at this point in time. And I do expect a rebuild for them. And, whenever you can add 3 picks, let alone a first-round pick, I think you're always willing to do that, especially with a player like Waddle, who has shown flashes, but he hasn't been by far and away one of those elite wide receivers in the league. And I think as for Denver's perspective, I remember when we made the trade for Stephon Diggs, I think this is very similar. You've got a quarterback on a rookie contract. You have guys who are around your quarterback who are solid, and Troy Franklin, Cortland Sutton, Humphrey, those type of guys. But there's really nobody who's going to take command of that. We've seen it with Cortland Sutton. As of the last 2 or so years, it's kind of been few and far between a little bit with him. They have the production at the end of the year still there. But that great pull-up right there, Maniac. That is exactly like that right there is an extremely difficult offense to guard. And you look at a team like that.
The only bad thing is I Wazowski'd you by accident. Stand by. There you go.
It's all good. That's going to be a team that's going to be very difficult. They saw how close they were to making the Super Bowl this year. If they have Bo Nix, maybe they do just that. And I think that's them completely buying in. And for them, this is their Stephon Diggs trade. As for the Bills, though, I think it all comes down to the wide receiver argument of how efficient can they be at the position. I know a few weeks ago they were top 5 in spending when it comes to the wide receiver position, and they have had average results. So to me, I don't think they're done at the wide receiver position. I do think they make a small move, maybe in free agency, let alone maybe a late round draft pick. But yeah, I do think both teams definitely got better, and both general managers are happy about it, like you guys mentioned.
I guess for the first time, I'm just realizing that the Denver Broncos weapons kind of wash us a little bit. Obviously, I mean, like their wide receiver 1 and 2 are definitely better than anybody we have, right? At this point, I mean, I think we might have them on a depth standpoint. We might have multiple tight ends better, overall than their second guy in Evan Ingram. I think we might have 5 wide receivers better than their top 5. But I'm looking at this unit. This is an impressive unit, boys. And this is the team, obviously, that went to the AFC Championship. This is a team that stopped us a little bit last year. So there's multiple facets to this trade. Like there's the fact that Waddle's the one that got away last year. Miami seems to be tanking it in. But Bunty, this worries me that we're going to be dealing with a lot of Denver. And I guess that's a team we faced back-to-back years in the playoffs, and there's going to be more on the way to come, it seems.
It's going to be interesting. A lot of that is going to come down to how much Bo Nix develops and can he take advantage of his weapons. I know on paper, Denver looks like a very talented offense, but let's not forget they were very mediocre last year. There was nothing special about what this offense was last season. They had an average passing game, and they had a decent run game when they had a healthy starting running back in Dobbins, but when he was out, so went their run game. What it comes down to is this: like you can look at the Bills' weapons, you can say they're weak, and yes, last year they had one of the worst receiver rooms in the NFL, if not the worst, and AJ was well ahead of me on that. But I think we got to see how this room changes with DJ Moore in the mix. They had no receiver one last year. They had nobody. They were hoping that Keon Coleman could be that guy, and Keon Coleman was a colossal failure. If DJ Moore can take the pressure off of some of the other guys in the receiver room, does that open things up for Khalil Shakir? Does that open things up for Dalton Kincaid in the pass game? We know they can run the ball. Now that they have Connor McGovern re-signed, there's really no reason why their run game should suddenly fall off a cliff with Alec Anderson being at left guard. They should still be able to run at a high rate. So can DJ Moore open things up down the field and in other parts of the pass game? I think he can. And if you actually look at some of his numbers compared to Jalen Waddle, he's actually had a lot more receptions of 20-plus air yards in recent years. His numbers are actually favorable against Jalen Waddle. I think some of the problems that people have DJ Moore versus Jalen Waddle is that Jalen Waddle is a year and a half younger, maybe a little bit more friendly contract. And because DJ Moore is turning 29, there's this perception that coming off of a 50-catch year for less than 700 yards, that he's falling off a cliff while Jalen Waddle is still in the prime of his career. I would point out that neither of them have had a 1,000-yard receiving season since 2023. So we can make the argument, like, did the Bills overpay for DJ Moore? Possibly. But Denver definitely overpaid for what Jalen Waddle has done production-wise. And another point to be made is that DJ Moore has been more of a volume receiver than what Jalen Waddle has been during his career. Jalen Waddle has the ability to make big plays, but he's been a number two. So there is a little bit of a risk with Denver. I know they have Cortland Sutton. They have a good receiver, but what is Jalen Waddle in Denver? Is he now suddenly a 1,200-yard receiver, or is he still going to be a 900, 1,000-yard guy? In Buffalo, DJ Moore is going to be the focal point. And I think you can safely estimate him to have around 70 catches for close to 900 to 1,000 yards next year, based on just pure volume alone. So there's a lot to be looked into. Was this the right move for Denver? Was this the right move for Buffalo? I'd say at the end of the day, it was the right move for both teams because they both needed to get more explosive. They both needed to get another alpha or threat in their room. And for the Bills, DJ Moore was probably the best they could get when you look at the price point of what Waddle got, what A.J. Brown was probably going to go for with Philly, and what free agency ended up presenting overall with price points.
Yeah, I look at Denver and New England, two teams with going into their, third-year quarterbacks and Drake May and Bo Nix. I look at what the Patriots have done this offseason. They've made a couple of splashes. I know they signed Romeo Doubs. They brought in some pass rushers defensively. But I really think if you look at a team that's going to regress to the mean a little bit, I'm thinking right now, if I had to choose between Denver and New England in this AFC conference, the two teams, one represented, New England in the Super Bowl, represented the AFC, and then Denver was the team that fell short, obviously, with that Bo Nix injury. I think that would have been a different outcome in that AFC Championship game. I would say right now New England's the team for me that is going to regress a little bit. And I think they're going to come down back to earth. I know Mike Vrabel, the first-year head coach bump, they had a lot of success. Trevion Henderson is going into year two. There's still some excitement there. But they lost to Stephon Diggs. And I know Romeo Doubs is going to be that guy, but he was just another dude in Green Bay. They didn't even care about re-signing him. So how much did they value him over in Green Bay? So that's where I'm at with that. And then I think, with like Mike said, I think for both teams, it's a sensible move. They both produce. They're both, good receivers. They've both done it at a high level for good offenses. I just like the Denver move a little more, and I think it pushes them a little over the top just because I think there's more defensive stability in the organization. I think they're better defensively. And I think that a move for a guy like Waddle, if they can reach that with already a Cortland Sutton, who Shakir and Sutton, I guess, are pretty similar. But Sutton's obviously had way more proven success and way more volume as a receiver in the league. I think that really can be that X factor move for the Denver team based off how their defense played last year, and that their offense can take that next, like Carson said, that Josh Allen, 2020 Bills step, where the offense in 2019 wasn't really that good, but the defense kept them in games. And then in 2020, it just, they just broke out. I'm not saying that Bo Nix is going to go Josh Allen 2020 mode, but I think Jalen Waddle can help elevate that. And for that reason, paired with their defensive stability and their, just their overall organization right now where they're at, I do like the move a little bit better for the Broncos. But I still think the more move offers some, it addresses a lack of wide receiver talent in Buffalo for sure.
Yeah, I just could never see the Bills. To me, it's the quantity of picks that, in essence, Denver's getting Waddle for really a first and a third. But I just could never see Brandon Beane in a year like this giving up his first-round pick on top of that, his third and his fourth, where they still have, it seems like they still have holes on the defensive side of the ball, and that there is a real question mark of the talent level on the team. And I think we saw that last year. And I'm not sure the free agent signings this year really get the team over the hump, and they beat those allegations, at least to the point yet on paper, of the talent is there and it's ready to compete. Gardner Johnson's a nice player. He seems to be a little bit on a decline. Geno Stone is a guy who Cincinnati Bengals fans, by all accounts, aren't a huge fan of. I'm curious to see kind of how the Bills maybe use him, maybe in a Taylor Rapp type of role. In Taylor Rapp's first role, he's a little bit all over the place. And then you get a guy like D. Elford, who has had some moments in Atlanta, but it's just kind of been a little bit of, 1 year good, 1 year bad type of thing. Those are all players that I think they have high hopes for, but it's guys who aren't really truly cemented these last 2 years of relevance and sample size, where they've really been consistent contributors of their team. Gardner Johnson's kind of flip-flopped a little bit around the league. But to the wide receiver conversation, DJ Moore is a guy who had a lot of success under Joe Brady. And I'm curious to see, now that McDermott is gone, if maybe there is a little bit of a let's go back to traditional offense. And I'm not saying they should or shouldn't do that, because the results kind of speak for themselves the last 2 years. But now that you have a guy who you at least view as a possible wide receiver one, I'm not so sure you're going to be seeing as many mesh concepts. You're still going to see a ton of screens, and mesh is a go-to in their playbook. But I do think they're going to try to find ways and matchups to get DJ Moore the football in more ways than just mesh and screens like we've seen with Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid. I think this allows you to be a lot more versatile in what you can call offensively. And yeah, they're going to have a great run game next year. That's going to help a lot. But I also think, at least from looking at DJ Moore's film, he did some killer stuff when Ben Johnson called the play action game. And I think DJ Moore can really, really help in that department. I know a lot of fans wanted Joe Brady call more play action last year.
And I do think that's good points that you bring up, Carson, because when you look at what the Bills want to do offensively, there has been clues that they want to get more 11 personnel. The league is always changing, and it's funny because when fans started complaining about the Bills running the ball more, it actually was the right call, because they were going up against lighter boxes and lighter defenses overall. So it actually was a favorable matchup to running the ball. But what are teams going to do now that they see you trying to take advantage of lighter defenses? They're going to need to adjust a little bit. And the adjustment might be, well, we need to get some bigger guys to stop the running game. And that, plus the Bills adding in a legitimate weapon, is going to be able to open things up for their pass game. Just look at how things changed last year when the Bills added a receiver late in the season. Obviously, Brandon Cooks isn't a star at this point. He's old. Some people would say he was washed up, but he was running wide open sometimes. And yes, he had some poor drops. But the fact is, the Bills felt that a 30-plus-year-old Brandon Cooks was enough to start taking shots downfield and to start opening up their offense. You got DJ Moore, who even off of this poor season, still has one of the better separator scorers in the league. This guy gets open. His problem in Chicago wasn't that he wasn't getting open. They weren't targeting him as much last year, and because they had a plethora of other weapons. And at the same time, there's a little bit of an effort problem with DJ Moore at times. And I'm not excusing that. That's inexcusable. But at the same time, when you go from being an alpha number one receiver that had nearly 100 catches 2 seasons ago, and then the year before that over 1,000 yards, to now you're getting 85 targets for an entire season, and you're still getting open, and your young quarterback's not even throwing you the ball, that's going to create some issues with a lot of good receivers across the league. And it's clear that that's kind of what led to Chicago not wanting him anymore. They basically got to the point where we have Loveland, we have Rome Odunze, Luther Burden III, Cole Kmet. We don't need a guy that we're paying $25 million a year for who's not going to be content in his role. So it made sense for them to unload some money, and it made sense for them to find a place where DJ Moore was going to have an opportunity to shine. And I would say this, the last 2 years, Josh Allen has thrown for under 4,000 yards. It's been more based on efficiency, running the ball, getting 5 yards on first down, trying to move the chains. Would not be surprised if Josh Allen throws closer to 4,500 yards next year than 4,000 yards.
I like that take. The tinfoil hat that wants to go on for myself is just thinking about how different the game plans were when we were playing, a Baker Mayfield or a Joe Burrow versus when they were playing like Michael Penix, or when we were playing like whoever the hell the Texans quarterback was that beat us.
Davis Mills.
Yeah, Davis Mills. Like, I just feel like we weren't as aggressive with those game plans, and I think I could see Brady being very aggressive this year, like you said, Bunty. Now, coming over to the overall grades for these grading these teams on these acquisitions, I think, AJ, you said it best, is that this, the Waddle move for Denver has a big time splash potential. That might be what they needed to get, Bo Nix to that next level. But for Allen, I think you just need someone to complement more, hopefully a healthy Kincaid, Shakir. And then it seems like the longer he stays on the roster, the more likely he might be here, Keon Coleman for sure. So interesting to see on that side of the ball. Why don't we reverse it up in the rotation? But first, folks, don't reverse your rotation. Make sure you always call Picasso's Pizza for the best pizza in Western New York. Go to picassospizza.net. Carson, you were talking a little defense, because this is basically the fullest revamp this defense has had. We kind of did it halfway, kind of ripped the Band-Aid off in 24 when there was that time where, Micah Hyde, Trey White, and Poyer were all cut in succession, essentially. But now that we're moving on completely and bringing in a lot of new defense, a lot of new personnel coming in, curious your thoughts on the revamped defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited to see what Jim Leonard can do. I mean, collectively around the league, this was a guy who a lot of coaches loved. And for us to get him as the defensive coordinator, I think is a really, really good hire, at least on paper. A guy who a lot of people think is probably going to be a head coach one day. And we've been a nickel defense 4-3 kind of look for majority of, really for all of Sean McDermott era. And now here we go. We're going to switch the scheme up a little bit. 3-4 kind of allows you to, in essence, to have a positionless players, which it gives you a higher ceiling to a certain extent with what you can do with some guys. Really, at the end of the day, I don't think it's a difference maker changing your scheme because there's 1,000 ways to milk a cow. We've seen teams that run 4-3s win Super Bowls. We've seen teams that run 3-4s win Super Bowls. I don't think that's the biggest of things. But with the guys that they have, for instance, a guy like TJ Sanders, he's going to be playing a little bit of a different shade, probably technique look up front, probably kicked out a little bit more, almost like a defensive end type of look. And guys like Greg Rousseau, the up front and the linebackers are really going to be, I think, where we're going to see maybe a little bit of a difference in how they line up, of course, with 3 down linemen compared to 4. But as far as the additions go and how they fit in, Gardner Johnson, good veteran player. His pass was probably 2 years ago, bounced around a little bit. A guy who is physical as hell, a very versatile player, can blitz the quarterback, can line up in the nickel a little bit, can play safety for you, can throw him all over the field. And then a guy like Geno Stone, who, a lot of Bengals fans aren't too high on. And he struggled against the pass at times. I think he had like 116 passer rate and he surrendered It might have been last year or 2 years ago. And that was a really, really big thing a lot of people decided to point out. But a guy, you never know what can happen. Change of scenery, right? He's talking about having Josh Allen now as a quarterback, getting back to a winning culture. I think that's a really, really big thing. It's a change of scenery for these guys, and you have a new coach, a new coaching staff that coach you up day in, day out, new system that you're in, and that just can be motivating mentally. And sometimes that's all you need. D. Elford's a guy who I think is going to be, in a way, your Taron Johnson replacement. I don't think he's got the same skill set to any real. I don't think he has the same skill set as Johnson had. He was a real dog, and Elford can hit. He's just, I think Taron Johnson was one of the best slot corners in the league when it came to that aspect. It's really hard to replace that with whoever you bring in. So I don't think this defense is done yet. I think defensively they're going to be heavy in the draft, as they should. I still think there's positions, specifically on the defensive line, that you should be looking at. Linebacker wise, I still think there's definitely some holes there. If they're just not going to do anything about it, that's seismic. Dorian Williams is a guy who's going to really have to play one heck of a year next year. Now that Milano's gone and Shaq Thompson's, at least for the moment, out the door. So a lot of question marks for me still. To me, the defense isn't there yet, but thankfully we still have, another 6 months before we kick off for football.
Yeah, there's a lot changing. I know Carson mentioned a lot of guys. Bradley Chubb is a name that the Bills have brought in. Yeah. He's a 29-year-old, played in Miami last year, or maybe the last couple of years. He's had some promise. He's tore his ACL 3 times, once in high school and then twice in the NFL. So that's a little bit concerning for an older player. How much juice does he have left? But, that's the risk you're going to have to take with the Bills cap situation when you've committed millions of dollars to guys that really haven't panned out at times. I think you have to take those risks. And I look around at the other defensive end contracts that were handed out this free agency, and I think Bradley Chubb is a pretty cheap deal compared to the rest of the edge additions across the league. And I think he does provide you some upside. He has some proven production. He likes playing on the right side, where Greg Rousseau likes playing on the left side. So that's interesting, where in years past, Von Miller loved the left side, so he was always lined up there. So Rousseau wasn't, maybe in his natural spot or where he was most comfortable. Same with Joey Bosa. So that'll be interesting to see. I think the scheme, like Carson said, I don't know how much it really changes. I think you're still going to see them line up. They're 3-4, but I still think in obvious passing downs, you're going to get the 2 edge rushers and the 2 interior pass rushers, just like you see. You're still going to see some nickel defense with D. Alford out there. But I'm excited to see what Bradley Chubb can bring. I think he's a guy that's done it in the NFL. He's a former first-round pick. He brings that ability to rush the passer. That's really what they're missing. Like C.J. Gardner-Johnson, okay, cool. He's a vibe switch-up. I think change is good, but it doesn't always, lead to results. Geno Stone, like Carson said, he's a 26-year-old, kind of that Jordan Poyer, not athletic, like old Jordan Poyer, where he lacks the athletic traits and the speed, but has some good ball skills, good in zone coverage, but just lacks some speed and athletic traits. And then you look at D. Alford, who's that physical nickel that like Carson said will replace Taron Johnson. So I have a lot of questions. I have questions with the linebacker room still. What's Dorian Williams' role going to look like? Is he going to be the guy? Is Matt Milano still out there as a possible re-signing on a cheap deal? Because I don't think his market looks too great right now. He's not signed anywhere. So I think that really tells you what his market is. And then Terrell Bernard, can he stay healthy? So I have a lot of questions, but they did make some additions. I like the Jim Leonard hire, switch it up, be more physical, be more aggressive. But, like we all know, just because he changed something up doesn't mean you're going to get the results. And I think in order for this Bills defense to take the next step, you're going to have to rely on in-house guys like Greg Rousseau and a Terrell Bernard and a Christian Benford and a Maxwell Hairston taking that jump where they can, really solidify themselves as some of the best in their position across the league. If those guys internally that they've committed to, that Brandon Beane has signed, he signed all these guys to huge contract extensions last offseason, you're not going to get better defensively because you put so much money in those guys that these older veteran signings or these cheap deals you're going to find in free agency aren't really going to make that much of a difference. So it's going to come down to the guys in-house for me.
It's going to be interesting. That's for sure. I am intrigued by some of the guys that they brought in, and I don't want to be the Mr. Positive on this podcast or the guy that comes a lot of
bias
local Bills narratives. I think people have been way too hard on Brandon Beane this offseason so far. The moves he's made have made sense and were exactly what this team needed. And a lot of people have acted like, oh, like DJ Moore isn't going to cut it at receiver one. Like, tell me who you would have gotten. And then you look at the defense. And the first reaction by several is, you're paying what? $29 million guaranteed to Bradley Chubb? Like, that's a discount, like, contract now for a starting defensive end. Like, there's guys in free agency that have not done much that are getting $20 million a year at defensive end. They're starting the all-pro defensive ends are getting $30 million a year now. Bradley Chubb is getting paid half of that. And it's essentially a 2-year deal. And Chubb, is he near the top tier of starting defensive ends? No. Can he be in the middle of the pack? Absolutely, he can be middle of the pack. Is he closer to the bottom right now? Well, based on PFF grades, yes. But he still gets you sack production. At 8.5 sacks last year. He's around the age of 30. He's not ancient. You can get a couple good years from him. Now, that can't be the only addition you do to your defensive line. You get a Bradley Chubb and you pair him with a Greg Rousseau, that's a good start. Draft an edge in the first round. Get another guy. Like, bring in someone else that can help with the line. Make it a good rotation. This defense is going to be it's a work in progress. There's going to be a lot of draft picks that are going to go towards fixing the defensive side of the ball, and it's not going to be a 1-year fix. And a lot of people, I think, are going to be frustrated because last year you spent a first-round pick on Maxwell Harrison, a second-round pick on TJ Sanders, a third-round pick on Landon Jackson, a fourth-round pick on Deion Walker, and that was supposed to be the defensive draft. You know what? They should probably do that again. You don't have a second-round pick. Get an edge, another edge, somebody that's young that can develop. Get a linebacker with one of your top 4-round picks. Get a linebacker that fits what you're trying to do, that can play soon in this defense. Secondary-wise, you got a good secondary this year. Like, you don't need to reach on a safety right now. You have C.J. Gardner-Johnson. You have Geno Stone. And you have Cole Bishop. You could say, yeah, you could still improve quite a bit, but if you're not getting somebody that's going to start right away, I think this takes safety out of the cards early in the draft right now. Corner is probably taken care of early in the draft. There's a lot of nickel different type corners, that slot corners that you can take at various points in this draft. I would say right now my priority is edge and linebacker. Try to get some more of those and try to continue fixing this defense. C.J. Gardner-Johnson is a quality player. Is he what he once was? No. But will he be good next to what this current group is? Yes. Geno Stone is good backup depth. You're talking about a guy that started for the last several years, who was an interception machine. If that's your backup, that's a huge upgrade over DeMar Hamlin as a depth piece. D. Alford is a guy that has played a lot, had 3 interceptions last year. Is he great? No. But he's decent. And these are guys that you can get by on. I'm not expecting the Bills to have a top 10 defense next year, and their floor is probably lower than what it was the last couple years. But their ceiling will be higher at moments. Why? Because they've been so vanilla in recent years that even when they've had the regular season success, it has never translated to when it matters the most in the playoffs. And guess what now? At least they're trying to switch it up, and change doesn't mean you're going to have success, but it means next time they're in a position up 4 points with 2 minutes left against Bo Nix in the playoffs or some comparable quarterback, maybe they'll get the stop because they're not running the most obvious defense that they've been running for the last 9 years. So change for the sake of change doesn't make sense. Change when you're trying to get to that next step does make sense. So I am excited about it. I'm excited about the draft coming ahead. And we'll just have to see how everything plays out. The one outlier, there is one thing the Bills could do that could shake things up dramatically. And that is, do they want to add a receiver in the first round? And that would be very intriguing to me because they're not getting any of these instant star guys. But when you have a DJ Moore who effectively might have like 2 good years in him, maybe 3, and you have a Khalil Shakir who's more of a slot receiver, and Josh Palmer who he's a 3. Keon, you don't even know if he's part of the team. If you want to shake things up a bit, get a receiver that you think has high upside and see if you can develop somebody in there. That's the one outlier pick that you could take a chance on maybe in the first round. That's not defense. But if they don't go receiver in round 1, I still think you gotta target one round 3, round 4, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's multiple runs for reason. I know they've given away a couple picks, but yeah, always somewhere to improve, especially you're going to need cost control on some of those dynamic positions. So drafting, whether it's edge or whether it's wide receiver, always a good way to go if you're Brandon Beane. Speaking of ways to go if you're Brandon Beane, since we talked about the offense, we talked about the defense, there's been additions on both sides, a couple subtractions. We do have breaking news brought to my attention by intern Carson, or actually Take King Carson. I'm sorry. Let me pull it up real quick here. Forgive my whole window there coming in. Let's see. There you go. The Vikings have signed Bills RFA tackle Ryan Vandermark to an offer sheet. I didn't know this was allowed. Is this not like the NHL where this is like you're kicked out of the cool kids club now?
It happened a couple of years ago. Remember, there was the Bills offensive lineman that, what was it, Chicago?
Bates.
Bates,
yeah. Okay. You give me credit. You give me credit for sniping that one because Ryan Bates isn't exactly a household name for sure.
You did save me for a second because I was forgetting his name. But yeah, it can happen. You don't see it a lot, but it will be interesting because Vandermark is definitely solid depth on the Bills. I guess it would all come down to what the money is, but after losing David Edwards, and I know Vandermark is a tackle, I don't think the Bills are going to want to lose more depth to this offensive line, but I guess it all depends on what the actual numbers are.
Most definitely. We'll have to see the numbers. We're just getting onto this topic. So again, we'll have to take a look at if we retain Vandermark, but great depth like Alec Anderson as well in that room. Speaking of room, is there more room based on what Brandon Beane's done? Well, now we might have spent a little on Vandermark, but curious what you guys think if there's still room for a move to be made in this free agency period before the draft. I know we probably won't spend as much time on this, but why don't we go around the horn, Bunty to Carson? What do you think? Is there still room for Brandon Beane to do a dance before the draft?
There's enough room to make small moves, but I wouldn't expect anything big. Honestly, I went into this offseason knowing they were going to make a splash at receiver. I knew they were getting somebody. I didn't know that they were going to also make a splash for a guy like Bradley Chubb and bring in a guy of the caliber of CJ Gardner-Johnson. The Bills have already gotten more starting caliber players through the offseason to this point than what I expected going into the offseason. Could they make another move? They could. I guess potentially if you do plan on parting with Keon Coleman, you could bring in another veteran depth receiver if you find a contract that's cheap enough for you. I can't really predict what they'll do at this point, but I would look out for some small moves, but realistically, anything substantial that it will impact this roster in terms of changing the way things look or how they can go forward with them, it's going to be done in the draft and later in April with your first round pick and your third round pick. And other than that, I don't really see many newcomers at this point making a huge difference. I know we could talk about guys like Elijah Moore getting signed late last offseason where there was all this hype around him. And then you watch him in training camp and preseason and you realize, oh, that's why this guy got signed right after the draft, because he has very little ability when it actually matters to make an impact at the NFL level. And yes, you can look at stats and it can confuse people and psych people up. But
you did say Geno Stone was an interception machine, so it can confuse.
Well, no, I mean, I'm not. I also said that Geno Stone is a backup to CJ Gardner-Johnson and Cole Bishop, so that's not exactly a ringing endorsement, AJ. Okay. But yes, I don't really see anything happening that's going to substantially change anything going forward.
Oh, I like when the boys get a little feisty with each other. I need to cue that up more often.
Yeah, I'll talk in Mike all day. I think that there could still be some moves on the horizon here. I think Brandon Cooks, a re-signing of him is a quite possible scenario there. He's an older guy in his early 30s. He provided some value for the team last year. I thought he was able to, open it up a little bit more. And I think he can provide that depth behind DJ Moore, where if DJ Moore, goes down or something and Keon Coleman doesn't take that jump, where he can provide that veteran depth on that, in that, that boundary X spot for this team. So I think Brandon Cooks is possible. And then I also think they'd be involved in the veteran guard market. I know Ryan Vandermark's potentially going to be matched by, because, Minnesota, they have 5 days, whatever, as a restricted free agent. The Bills will have 5 days to match that. I think it's like a little north of $3 million. So that's what they're going to have to match if they want to keep Vandermark in Buffalo. And I think they probably will, just for that tackle depth that they need. But I also think guard is a big thing. You got Osiris Torrance, his contract coming up this year, so he's got 1 more year left, and then David Edwards is gone. So really your only guard right now is Alec Anderson, and I know you have Cedric Van Granger and maybe a couple other guys that are, Chase Lunt might be a guy they have down there in the depth chart, but I would like to see a veteran guard on a 1-year deal come in to see, with starting experience, just to kind of provide some sort of battle there at the guard spot. Not that Alec Anderson isn't good or he can't play the position, but he's never played meaningful snaps as a starting player in this league, and he's been in the league a couple of years now. So I say Brandon Cooks, veteran depth receiver, and maybe a guard. But I think other than that, maybe a veteran linebacker, like maybe a cheap Matt Milano signing. But linebacker, guard, and receiver for me are the 3 things that I think could still be addressed in a cheap manner in free agency.
Yeah, I mean, the last 10 minutes or so, I've been looking at Spot Track and seeing who's still available. And there's definitely some names out there. I think, like you brought up, AJ, the interior guard spot, I think 2 guys to keep an eye on are Wyatt Teller. That's a guy who Beane said that he made a mistake on trading away, and he's been an absolute dog. He's kind of been hurt a little bit lately. And another guy's Alex Kappa, who, his pass is probably behind them, but still a veteran guy. And then the wideout position, I think Jahan Dotson and Deebo Samuel are 2 guys that could definitely fit. Maybe at the linebacker position, a guy like Levante David, if he wants to get a cheap deal, or Devin Bush. And then in the secondary, I wouldn't mind going after a guy like L'Jarius Sneed, who just got cut by the Titans. And then for edge, it's probably Hassan Reddick, then Mike Dana, Bilal Nichols, and Derek Barnett also go in that interior D-line edge type of group. So those are all guys who are veterans who've been around the block, and they could definitely provide you some depth. And just talking about these guys, I know, Maniac, you're laughing. This gets me fired up.
He's got he's got an appetite 24/7. He's never says, sign them all, bring them all in on Vetmans. Let's go. Last dance for them all with Josh Allen. Let's go.
Still got to finish the last dance. We're on episode 7, but we're getting there slowly but surely. But yeah, I wouldn't mind Brandon Cooks either. He's a guy who I'm one of the biggest Brandon Cooks guys there is around, and to see him have success in the postseason, besides that last play that ultimately kind of changed our season. It was good to see, and I definitely wouldn't mind bringing him back on a cheap deal. And he certainly can be your wide receiver 5 or wide receiver 6. A guy who, if he's a healthy and active, so what? He's a guy that can provide some juice if you need it.
I don't want to get the vitriol of literally everyone with a pulse, but is it a hot take that like the Cooks ball was underthrown?
A little bit.
It was definitely
should have been caught.
I think if it's a properly thrown ball, Cooks catches, we win. He goes in standing up.
Yeah.
That's out of a take. I don't think that's
all I'm saying. Listen, you live with Superman 24/7. You don't point out when he knocks over a building. That's plain and simple, for sure.
That's week 6 of Pay the Bills, and you have Mike and Carson going back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you could go on a tangent on that topic forever, but yes, it's all about just complimenting Josh Allen the best we can. And this defense, I mean, let's face it doesn't seem like it's going to be the bend, don't break that we've seen in years past from McDermott. That traditional, let up a 3 to 4 minute drive and get that timely turnover, or force that 45+ yard field goal, something like that. I think it's going to be more opportunistic, more about we didn't even mention that, it's turnover driven, things like that. So very interested to see, and there are still some names out there for certain. Getting into our report cards, I think it's time to grade Brandon Beane. I will kick this off, then anyone who wants to go in can take over. I think he could have done a little bit better. The worst thing of this entire process to me was the fact that mid-round pick came out and then it said second-round pick in the next tweet. That was one of the worst sequences of this entire thing for Brandon Beane to me. Besides that, I like all the players. I think we've gotten good deals for the most part on players that we did sign. I think we moved the Dawson Knox contract to not only get money for this year, but 3 years at $10 million per year seems pretty fair, and kind of like a little hometown similar deal to him taking there. So I don't want to crown him. I don't want to crown his ass, Dennis Green. But I will go with a B+ for Brandon Beane. I tend to agree with Bunty. I think Bills fans have been a little hard on him this offseason, when I think you might be getting back Joshua Palmer, a fully healthy Dalton Kincaid. Palmer played a lot of games, but he clearly never recovered to me after that Atlanta game. Never came back and was the same guy. So very interested to see how those weapons come back. But I think Brandon Beane's done a good job of accentuating the roster. Who else has their marks ready to go?
I'll let the other guys go first.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's similar to you, Maniac. I think he's done a really nice job restructuring deals. He got creative with the whole Dawson Knox extension. Nobody really saw that coming. They thought probably he was a instant cut candidate. Instead, you save some money, backloaded a guy who's been loyal to your organization for his career. He's coming off a year when Dalton Kincaid went down. He was very, very reliable. He did everything you ask. He's a guy who can run block for you if you need, can provide a little bit of a threat and a little bit of a spark still in the passing game. And let alone, of course, he is one of Josh Allen's best friends. You can't go wrong with that.
Big points.
Yes, collectively, I think he's done a really nice job creating some cap space. We saw the Allen restructure along with several other players to allow for some creativity and who we can get and go after. And to me, I just need a little bit more. I don't think this offseason has kind of got me to the point where I'm at. Okay, we're ready to play. New head coach. We're completely a revamped team, and I didn't necessarily expect that. I thought, with the salary cap situation we're in, we got about $9 to $11 million left. I thought, there'd be some minor deals. And then maybe one or two significant ones. And we got our 1 to 2 significant ones, I think, with Moore and Bradley Chubb. But those two guys, good pickups. They make our team better. With that said, I'd like to see us have a little bit more depth. And there's still plenty of time to do that. Still plenty of guys to go after. So right now, I think overall I'm a little bit of a TBD grade. But if I had to give them one, I'd say a B minus, 81 out of 100.
Yeah, I'm right with where Carson's at. I'm at a B minus. I think the Connor McGovern re-signing and the extension of him, I think, was the best move that Beane made. But that's not saying much because I was super happy and excited when they re-signed Rousseau last year and Bernard and kept all those guys and Benford. So I was ecstatic about that, and that does not look as good now as it did. But I would go a B minus. I think he's done a decent job. He went after the vet, edge rusher where they weren't in the market for a Max Crosby. He wasn't going to be willing to part with 2 first-round picks with the state of the defense, and he wasn't going to sign Trey Hendrickson to $30+ million. So they attacked, a cheaper veteran guy that's had some success in the league, and they brought him in with some injury concerns. And I don't really know what that does because I feel like we're in the same spot every year with the edge room and where we feel like, well, if Greg Rousseau takes a step, if this 30-year-old, veteran injury prone guy comes in and turns it around and has a full season, we can take that step. So that's the only frustrating thing, but I get why he has to do it because we're in that situation. So I'll give him a B minus. I think, again, the defense is changing. I know he talked a lot about, previous years with the offense and how they needed to be run heavy and how the change was needed and how that's going to be the reason they get over the top. And they still weren't able to figure it out. So it's hard when it feels like all the answers, like it feels like them changing the defense and committing to Joe Brady is really their last pivot to all of this with Josh Allen. It's like, this is it. Like if their defense, if they go from this like soft zone, 4-3, playing a lot of nickel, kind of letting defenses attack them and then adjusting and kind of, going throughout the game and fixing it to like this attack oriented. Let's force turnovers. Let's get after the quarterback. Let's rush 6. Let's rush 7. And they still can't figure it out. It would feel like all kind of the bubbles have been checked and there's no really way to frame it to be like, well, they're changing it. Like this is going to be good. Like this is going to be great. So that's my only concern. It feels like we're kind of running out of those bubbles, and this is the last one. But I'll go B minus. DJ Moore was a good move. The Connor McGovern re-signing, I think, was my favorite move. And the defensive additions, like I said, I think it's more important for me. The guys internally, they need to take us to that next level in order for this defense to take it to another level.
I'm going to go B plus, and I think B minus is a tad bit too negative. And the reason why I say that is when I grade an offseason, I'm not grading based on necessarily who exactly came in. I'm grading you based on what was your situation entering the offseason. How much money did you have? What did you do to restructure guys, to create space? And were you able to keep the guys that you needed to keep? And were you able to address your main concerns? going into the offseason, the Bills were very limited with salary cap room. And I remember people saying, oh, they don't have the money to get this guy. They don't have the money to get that guy. What are they going to do? They've already added 3 starters, and they kept one of their own. Like, the whole point of the offseason was get a number 1 receiver. They got a number 1 receiver. They got one of the best receivers available on the market. Yes, you could argue they gave up a 2nd-round pick. Well, the guy everybody wanted them to get had for a 1st and a 3rd. So if people didn't like up giving a 2nd, how would they have thought about giving up a 1st and a 3rd when you have a rebuilding defense? And I agree with your bubble point, AJ. You make a good point. Like, what's going to happen if the defense doesn't work and this doesn't work out? Well, I hate to break it, not to you, but to like fans. The defense ain't going to be that great this year. It's not. It's going to stink at times. It's going to look bad. It's more likely this defense is bad than it's good. But you're not switching the defense because you're expecting them to suddenly be magically good. This is a process. It takes multiple years to reset your entire defense. There's going to be some guys that are probably going to be out of place. But why do you do this now? Because you're acknowledging that the defense that you've been running for the last 9 years wasn't going to get the job done. So you have to do it at some point. So does the defense have to be perfect in September, October, November? No. It just needs to be better in January than what it has been the last 8 years. So I don't expect this defense to be great right away. You have a lot of mishmash guys with this right now. There is upside. Bradley Chubb, and this is like what I struggle to when people are hating on the Bradley Chubb move, and then they're like, get a proven guy that's going to be successful. We're saying, get a proven guy. Well, you know who the proven guy in the market was? The 31-year-old who played only 7 games last year, who just got close to $30 million a year. That carries risk. So, yes, Bradley Chubb might not be great. But Trey Hendrickson, if he misses half the games, is even hurt you even more because of how much money he would be getting. And you wouldn't have had the money to then get C.J. Gardner-Johnson and then get the money for D. Alford and Geno Stone and other guys like that. If you go after Max Crosby, yes, he looks great on paper, but you give up 2 first-round picks, and you don't even know Max Crosby what he's going to project to be this year because of his health. What does he look like? And if he's not the player that you thought you were getting, you don't have those first-round picks. So, like, I love this whole, like, get a sure thing. There ain't sure things in the NFL. The sure things are normally top 10 picks and then Myles Garrett. And if you ain't giving up 4 first-round picks to get a Myles Garrett, you're not getting a sure thing. So, like, I hate this. Like, last year, like, we were all excited about all the guys that they extended in Buffalo. And then a year later, we're like, Greg Rousseau has been a little bit of a disappointment. Like, maybe we shouldn't have given him as much money. And then you see free agency this year, and you see all the money defensive ends are getting, and you're like, oh, I guess Greg Rousseau, even off of his average season, is still getting paid what his market value should be. And I see the comment, oh, no, I know you're being sarcastic, Geno Stone or D. Alford. This defense needed volume. It didn't need one guy. One guy on the defense doesn't make any difference in whether they're going to be successful or not. We have seen great guys, Micah Parsons on Dallas, be one of the top 5 players in the league on defense. You know what the Bills did when they ran against Dallas a couple years ago? They ran the ball for over 200 yards because you negate him. You can negate any single player on defense. Defense is about playing as a unit, playing in unison, knowing your assignments, doing your job, doing it together as a team. When you have selfishness on the edge, that leads to big runs. You can be exploited. That's why Joey Bosa, despite all of his talent, was a detriment for the Bills down the stretch because he didn't help out on setting the edge at all, and he was a detriment in the run game. This defense needs volume. They need depth. And they need guys to step up in case of injuries. It's not going to be perfect this year, but people are kidding themselves that they think a Trey Hendrickson or a Max Crosby is suddenly going to be the reason why this defense goes from where it is to being a top 10 defense. It's not going to make a difference. Like, we're talking about, like, Max Crosby, like, he's amazing. Yes, he's an amazing player. He gets 10 to 11 sacks a year. That's 0.7 sacks a game. Like, the difference between an elite defensive end and a middle tier defensive end is like 4 to 5 sacks over the course of a season, which is it's next to nothing. And then you divide that by the amount of snaps you're playing in a game, 40 to 50 snaps. You're talking about like 1 sack every 100 plus snaps. Like, when you break it down, that's not like what's going to make the difference in you being good or bad on defense. So, sorry, rant over. The point of it being,
I like that.
The point of it being, the Bills were limited this year going into the offseason. A lot of it by Brandon Beane's own doing in the past. But given the situation they were in, the fact they were able to acquire number 1 receiver, a starting defensive end, a starting safety, a nickel corner, I'm encouraged by that. I would give it a B+. I could change it to a B, and I could be talked into that. But we'll see. What's really going to make the difference is how does he do in the draft this year? If he kills it in the draft, this could be an A offseason. If he screws up another draft, this could be a C+. It's gonna come down to the draft. And this is a draft where you have to go high volume defense. And because your offense is going to score 25 plus points a game, no matter who you have, as long as Josh Allen's your quarterback. So let's see how they get it done. And like AJ said, they're running out of chances. They better be right on their strategy here, or else how much longer are you going to be able to keep trying to sell to fan base that you're one play away, you're one game away, you're one step or change away from getting over the top?
I agree. I think that was a good Bunty rant there for sure. The one thing I'm not so sure of is the defense necessarily going to be so much worse than last year? I mean, there were times last year when the defense was pretty audaciously bad. You're talking about 20 points plus in the first half at Atlanta in the first half in primetime and Houston in primetime. Like, there were just some episodes that looked really bad for them. I think they made it up as things went along the way, but there were some big spots where that defense was really a letdown last year to me.
If you had to ask, I'll bring this up. Where does the Bills defense rank at the end of the year? I'm going to say somewhere between 13 to 16. I don't know what you guys think. That's where I go.
Yeah, I would probably take that. I think most importantly is just that your rushers are being dogs at that time of the year, and they take that next step. Definitely, that's what you saw. I mean, I think the Seahawks defense was like playing its best ball the other day. They were a top unit for sure. Nobody's doubting that. But they were playing like unbeatable ball towards the end of the year. But speaking of numbers games, speaking of calling the numbers, let's get into it before we sign off here on Pay the Bills. Size does matter, boys. We were fortunate yesterday to grab a minute with Bills. Should we call him Czar? Pete Guelli?
Pete, I think you accurately said this is a historic period for sports in downtown Buffalo. Since Matt brought it up, history will also be judging the size of the Buffaloes outside the stadium. Can we get any insight on that?
I think people will be happy with that size. I'm not ready to disclose anything right now, but we're getting closer. Probably within the next couple of weeks, we'll have some additional information, and I don't think anyone will be disappointed.
All right, credit Matt Beauvais.
All right, thank you, Pete Guelli, there for taking the time yesterday at the KeyBank Center for the NCAA tournament in town. So these Buffaloes, the only thing that matters to me about these Buffaloes, the number does not even matter. The Tom Brady statue should not be able to easily mount one of these Buffaloes. That's my only verdict at the end of the day. So give me, if I'm guessing the size on these Buffaloes to close out this Pay the Bills pod episode, give me a 15-foot Buffalo.
I think you'll be close. It'll probably be like 16, 17 feet would be my guess.
I'll go bigger. I'll go 24 feet.
Oh, that would be so sick.
That's huge. Yeah, I'm gonna go in the middle. I'm gonna say anywhere from like 18 to 20 would be appropriate.
Everyone that's acting like they're in the know says that like the photo ops are a big part of this. That you don't want them to be too big to take up the stadium in the background. Bunty, you would know about
I need to be invited to this. Like if I don't get an invite to the Buffalo unveiling, I'm gonna be pretty ticked off. I'm not gonna lie. I as the unofficial photographer of New Highmark Stadium since before they even officially started building the thing. I better get an invite to this. They can say they don't know who I am, but they know who I am. As Pete Weber famously said, "Who do you think you are? I am that photographer." So I better be there when this all goes down.
But Bunty's going full Heisenberg. Say my name, he's saying, to Bill's PR for sure. Should be interesting. Yeah, probably should be in the coming weeks. But it was pretty cool to catch up with Pete there. I'll have to give him a ribbing about the gold ring sponsor banners in the arena next time I see him for sure. Any final thoughts, boys, before we sign up on this episode of Pay the Bills? I know I was slacking a little bit. I got absolutely corkscrewed by those trade details on the Broncos Dolphins of it. My brain had a full on shutdown. But before we shut down on this episode, anything you want to bring up or shout out before we go?
All good, man. All good. Exciting show. And just want to tell anybody that was watching, make sure to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And we're going to have a lot more of these come draft time. And stay on the train because it's going to be exciting come April.
One more real quick one, with yesterday being the 6-year anniversary of the signing of Stefon Diggs, who will probably historically go down as a top 5 guy in Buffalo receiver history. Is that a fair point? Reed, Moulds, Johnson,
Diggs.
Lofton, Diggs.
Top 3.
Yeah. So again, he's up there. I was honestly trying to think, what is Stefon Diggs' best moment as a Bill? This sounds crazy, but I feel like it's almost like seeing the clips of him in the pregame, throwing with fans and stuff like that. And some of the times, he was warming up with Josh Allen. Those stick out to me as the best moments. I think to the 2022 home opener when he had 3 touchdowns on Monday Night Football against Tennessee Titans. I think the longest was a 50-yarder, but that was definitely a sick moment. But he really just was a volume guy. No one moment. He kind of got robbed of some moments, the Cardinals go-ahead catch he had in 2020. Then that gets Hail Married after that. He kind of had that happen a couple times, but he didn't really have too many defining moments. He just had a lot of, overwhelmingly above-average good play.
Yeah.
Didn't he have 3 touchdowns against Patriots in 2020?
Yes. Yes, 100%. That's another good one.
That's probably my top.
I think mine would be. Well, I was going to say the Arizona before the Hail Mary because that was just a crazy drive and they went down and that front pylon catch. My sarcastic comment would be the second I saw the notification that he was gone. But I would say the Detroit catch over the middle to put them in field goal.
Yes, that's probably it.
Allen threw it on a rope in that game. that was the game I think they lost Von Miller, unfortunately, when he was having a really good start to the year. But that catch over the middle. That was, the arm arrogance on that throw and the catch was just unreal.
The Miami catch where he broke the tackle, spun out.
Oh, man.
And that Miami game was pretty wild.
Stadium came unglued when he was running along the 40 basically with nobody who was going to catch him. So those are great moments for sure. Definitely something you look back on. Obviously, whether you like him or not, great moments when he was in a Buffalo football uniform. Shout out everybody tuning in, like we said, on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Make sure you're following Carson Hayek, AJ Cebulski, Mike Bunt, and Pay the Bills podcast because we are rolling on. There's a time to put in the work. There's a time to kick your feet up, and there's a time to pay the bills. Have a good night now.